الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له الملك الحق المبين وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله سيد ولد آدم أجمعين وصلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه الطيبين الطاهرين على مر الأيام والليالي والشهور والسنين أما بعد. As we continue in the lesson by the great Imam Ahmad Ibn Ali Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani rahimahullah متوفى سنة 856 المتوفى سنة 852. The great Imam al-Hafiz Ahmad Ibn Ali Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani rahimahullah, he would have died 852 after the migration of our Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. The time now is 7:16 p.m. Saturday, May the 25th, 2024 of the non-Muslim calendar, which agrees currently on the Islamic Tariq al-Islami al-Hijri. It is the 17th of the Qa'dah, the year 1445 after the migration of our Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. As we were discussing the matters pertaining to the different types of invalid marriages, we've given the details of that. You'll find that the great Imam in the title, in the chapter that we were discussing, which is Kitab al-Nikah, we discussed the matter of the hadith of Uthman ibn Affan, the great Sahabi, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا ينكح المحرم ولا ينكح. This is the narration where we stopped. We said that the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam, that he mentioned that the muhrim does not marry, nor does he marry anyone off. The muhrim is the one who's in the state of umrah. The one who's performing umrah or hajj. You'll find that we know that the state, a sacred state called ihram, is the state in which one becomes when they go past the miqat. Those matters we'll discuss within a moment. So the muhrim is the one who's in the state of what they call ihram. For those who perform umrah and hajj are familiar with this state. When one passes what they call the miqat, and currently you'll find that the mawaqit or the miqat are places where it's located in it, masajid. So it's a sign and it's a tower now you'll find that has been facilitated in a land which is currently the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And they have all those different directions you'll find that are put in those specific locations, which is called the miqat. And you'll find the miqat currently, you'll find in those areas are masajid. So when one passes those miqat, they assume the sacred state called ihram. And ihram is a prerequisite, rather it's a pillar from the performance of hajj and umrah. So if one wanted to perform hajj and umrah, the area in which they're coming from or the direction that they're coming from, they have to pass what they call the miqat, so they can now assume that sacred state, what they call ihram. Once you now are in that sacred state, then you are considered what they call a muhrim. And you'll find the muhrim, the men from amongst them, they wear what they call a rida with izar, that they wear the robe or the top garment, and then the bottom one, as we know, is called the izar. And you'll find that they're supposed to wear those type of white garments that you see, or that some of us are familiar with. That affair, everyone, is called ihram, and the men that are in that sacred state is called a muhrim. Meaning he's in the state of ihram. Meaning he passed the miqat, he made his intention for hajj or umrah, according to the time frame. As we know, throughout the year, one can perform umrah, but hajj is only for those sacred months in which we are in right now, everyone. which is Dhul Qa'dah, and next month will be Dhul Hijjah. At any rate, once a person now is in the state of ihram, he's a muhrim. Once you are now in that sacred state, it is not permissible, where the Messenger of Allah mentioned these narrations, where one can now either marry or marry one off, meaning his daughter or whoever is under his protection or under his what? Under his responsibility. Notice it says in the narration, رواه مسلم وفي رواية الله ولا يخطب وزاد ابن حبان ولا يخطب عليه. This other narration, it says ولا يخطب, that he does not indulge in what everyone, a marital engagement. So it's not just the mere fact that he doesn't marry and he marries off. In this narration, you'll find, if you look in your books, everyone, what does it say? ولا يخطب. And the khitbah is just a mere marital engagement. It's a marital engagement. So it's not marriage itself. It's one that's what? In the prerequisite or in the introduction stages for marriage. And we know those matters are called what everyone? Marital engagement. Meaning, that's the affair that comes before the marriage itself. Then it says in the narration of Ibn Hibban, وَلَا يُخْطَبُ عَلَيْهِ, nor is it requested from him a marital engagement. Nor is it sought from him or requested from him a marital engagement. So he doesn't indulge in a marital engagement, nor should one seek it from him. So those are the matters we discussed in brief last class in regards to these matters pertaining to the state of what they call a muhrim. So muhrim, like we said, once he's in that sacred state, you'll find that the Messenger of Allah clarified that he's not to indulge in these matters pertaining to marriage at all. So he does not la yankih, he does not marry, nor does he yunkih, nor does he marry anyone off, nor does he embark upon a marital engagement, nor is it sought from him that matter. So that's what we said last class in brief. We just summed that up, and that's what we said. You'll find in the other narrations, because we want to complete what was mentioned in this regard before we move on to the next topic. So, if you look at your books, everyone, it says the hadith of Uthman ibn Affan, radiyallahu anhu. Then, if you look, there's another narration upon Abdullah ibn Abbas, radiyallahu anhuma, قال, so let's read this quickly. تزوج النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ميمونة وهو محرم والحديث متفق عليه. When you thought Abdullah ibn Abbas, that the Messenger of Allah married Maymuna, and he was muhrim. He married from our mothers, meaning from the mothers of the believers, which is from the wives. So the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, was Maymuna. And the Messenger of Allah at that time was muhrim, that he was in a state of ihram. And that narration has been reported in Hadith Bukhari with the exact same wording, which they call muttafaqun alayh. The next narration, if you look in your books, وَلِي مُسْلِمٍ عَنْ مَيْمُونَةَ نَفْسِهَا رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهَا أَنَّ النَّبِيَّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمْ تَزَوَّجَهَا وَهُوَ حَلَالٌ. That the Messenger of Allah, that he married Maymuna and he was halal. What does that mean? Meaning that he was not in ihram anymore. Or he, alayhi salatu wasalam, was in the second stage of tahallul, meaning relieving himself from the state of ihram. We'll talk about these matters within a moment, so don't worry. But the point that we want to mention, if you look in the narration, Maymuna said herself that the Messenger of Allah married her and he was halal. What does that halal mean? Meaning he was not in the state of ihram anymore. So that's what it means. Because before those matters, if he's still in the state of ihram, he's considered muhrim. For that reason, marriage will be what? Haram in that particular instance. So as long as he's in that state, those matters are considered unlawful. However, if you look in the context, what does it say? That the Messenger of Allah married her, and this is Maymuna saying it herself, reporting the narration herself, saying that the Messenger of Allah married her and she was halal. That he was halal. That he was halal, meaning that he was not in the state of ihram anymore. طيب, so let's keep going. These narrations, everyone, is pertaining to one who's considered a muhrim and marrying while he or she is in that state. For example, the man is called the muhrim and the woman is called the muhrimah. So the man is called the muhrim and the woman is called the muhrimah. The Messenger of Allah prohibited that a muhrim that he marries. So when a person is in ihram, he does not marry. But we know that this wording in the narration, everyone, is comprehensive for the male and female, or for the woman and the man. It's not permissible for a woman also who's in a state of ihram to be married off. Notice the message of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what he say in this narration, la tunkah. Of course, the woman is not married off, because we know that the woman cannot marry herself. So she has to be married off from whoever's in charge of her affairs, from her father or whoever, or what have you, from her family members. وَالرَّجُلُ لَا يَجُوزُ أَن يَنْكِحْ. For the man also does not marry. That is because, like we said, if he marries and he's in the state of ihram, then it is not except that you'll find that it's up to what states. For example, if a person now marries while he's in ihram, we know once one performs, or rather they're in their state of ihram, embarking upon performing hajj or umrah, everyone, we know from the affairs that will invalidate your hajj or will invalidate your umrah is what? Being intimate. So you'll find that when a person embarks upon, like we said, hajj or umrah, and they're in the state of ihram, what will invalidate it is what, everyone? Intimacy. Even if it's with your own what? Wife. So, what will happen is one or two circumstances. Either the person will be hasty, and what will happen is what? He'll fall into it. He'll fall into being intimate with his wife. And as a result of it, we know that the end result is what? The invalidation of his rituals, meaning his hajj or umrah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in his book in Surah Al-Baqarah, وَأَتِمُّ الْحَجَّ وَالْعُمْرَةَ لِلَّهِ. Complete hajj and umrah for Allah. And from completing hajj and umrah is to avoid intimacy while one is in that state. They're not to be what? Intimate. So, that's the first circumstance of why the Messenger of Allah made this matter unlawful. So, it will not lead to what? Especially if a person now has never been married, especially this is his first marriage, and a person is not acclimated to that type of lifestyle, he's very excited. So in that instance, that will lead him more than likely to what? He might more than likely fall into something. Especially if he's a man, like we said, that's never been married, never experienced that life, and like we said, this affair comes, he'll be excited, and then it might lead to what? Invalidation of his hajj or umrah. So that's one of the two states you'll find that the ulama mentioned about this matter of why the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam, made it unlawful in this particular or specific circumstance. So that's one thing. As for a person that's acclimated and then he accompanies his wife, then we know more than likely he's acclimated to that particular what? Lifestyle. So it's not more or less a fitna upon him or her. However, a man now that's embarking upon that affair, in the beginning stages, he's what? Excited. Or she might be what? Excited. So based upon that, you'll find he might be hasty, and then they both fall into what? Falling to be intimate, and as a result of it, they invalidate their what, everyone? Their hajj or their umrah. The second affair is the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam was taking consideration one's mind and mind frame. So a person now embarks upon a new marriage, whether it be male or female, of course. Usually in most cases, their mind will be what? Become preoccupied. You'll find that the man, especially, he'll be thinking about what? His wife, especially if it's a new marriage. And the wife will be thinking about more than likely what? The husband. Where in this time, one's mind is supposed to be devoted to what? Worship. Especially, it's a lifetime opportunity. Especially Hajj and Umrah, we know those matters might not happen again in one's life. So one, having that opportunity, he wants to capitalize upon the what? that opportunity that might not present itself in his or her life ever again. Especially if one is coming from long, great distances, and certain people have paid a lot of money, and then they come all the way there and they invalidate their Hajj and Umrah. So they sacrifice their time, their efforts, them saving money and whatever, all to arrive at that particular place, and then what? Fall into something that basically all those efforts went away without any true benefit. So the message of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, based upon the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and what He revealed to the message of Allah, is for one to capitalize upon these great opportunities and moments in the most efficient way. Where now you're embarking upon worship, so where you're not preoccupied, and your mind is not what? It's not distributed. Rather, you're able to give your full undivided attention to this matter of Hajj and Umrah. So that's the reason why the message of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made this prohibited. Number one, like we said, it will invalidate your Hajj and Umrah. And second, it will what? It will busy one's mind to the point where it'll be preoccupied thinking about marriage or thinking about intimacy or thinking about things that will have his mind thinking about other than what he came there for, which is affairs pertaining to being devoted in worship. For that reason, like we said, that's why the message of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam prohibited that matter. Fine. It says, وَلَا يُنْكِحْ. Also, the message of Allah made it clear in the narration. If you look at your books, everyone, لَا يُنْكِحْ. He doesn't marry anyone off. So, this wording is this wording is pertaining to the wali. The wali is the one that's in charge over the what? Female. So, if the wali, if he's a muhrim, it's not permissible also to marry anyone off. لا يزوج موليته. Who he's responsible for, he does not marry her off. Even if, وَلَوْ كَانَتْ حَلَالًا, even if she was not in the state of ihram. Even if she wasn't in the state of ihram. And he's in ihram. In that instance, it's still not permissible for him to marry what? Anyone off. So those matters, like we said, everyone, is what the message of Allah clarified in this narration. The next wording, what does it say if you look at your books? وَفِي رِوَايَةِ اللَّهِ لَا يَخْطُبْ. He does not engage in a marital engagement, or he does not indulge in a marital engagement. So, he doesn't go to anyone seeking a marital engagement. Seeking a marital engagement. يَخْطُبْ مُولِيَتَهُ إِبْنَتَهُ أَوْ أُخْتَهُ. For example, that now he will indulge or partake in a marital engagement. It doesn't matter whether it's pertaining to his daughter or sister or what have you. Someone might approach, someone will come, and they offer themselves and say, well, listen, I would like to marry your daughter or your sister or what have you. Those are basically offers of whatever you want, marital proposals or marital engagement. In that instance, also, that matter is what? Prohibited. And like we said, it's all in order for one to be enabled to what everyone be devoted in worship and not to be busy in these matters, because everything has its time and its what? In its place. And like we said, based upon the fact that Hajj is not an easy affair and people come from remote distances. And they sacrifice their lives, their livelihood, their money, to come and to be what? To be devoted to their Lord. So it's not the time for that affair. It's not the time for it. So those matters, like we said, the time, especially in that time frame, Islam, and out of the infinite wisdom to show you how complete the religion of Islam is, the message of Allah wanted one's heart to be tied in with what they're there for. So they can be devoted for their worship, and they can be from those who attain the full benefit of why they're there, without their mind becoming what? Preoccupied. So then it goes on to mention itself, وَلَا يُخْطَبَ عَلَيْهِ. He said also, it's not requested from him a marital engagement. So if the woman is a muhrima, also, it's not sought from her that what? Marital engagement. Then no one should come to her and say, well, I know someone, are you desiring someone or so-and-so, or you think those matters, like we said, everyone, are not to be what? That door, if one is able to shut it. To say, this is not the time for that. We'll talk about that later. And when I'm finished, we'll speak about it. So the message of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam, that he prohibited the aqd al-nikah, not only in this state here or in this specific instance, the marital contract, but also its methods and the affairs that will lead to it. And like we said, the khitbah or the nikah and the aqd, the marital proposal, the marriage itself, or the contract. All of those matters should be what? Should be put off for a moment in time to another what? Another time. So in the narration is the forbiddance of nikah al-muhrim, the forbiddance of a muhrim marrying. And that, like we said, the message of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said it clear, la yinkih, la yinkih. طيب. Does that necessitate now that the marriage, like we said, is invalid? It's غير صحيح. Now, what I want to mention, that we know in Hajj, everyone, there's two types of affairs that what they say is the first stage of becoming halal. In Hajj, I'm talking about Hajj now, not Umrah. Hajj. If you look in the different types of when a person gradually leaves out of the state of ihram, it becomes what they call tahallul al-awwal, and then you have what they call tahallul al-thani. You have the first type of halal, when you become halal. I'm going to break it down, don't worry. And then you have the second type where everything becomes halal. Where everything becomes halal. And I'm going to mention the meaning of that. طيب. But a person now, for example, makes Hajj. Example. A man, he performs Hajj. You'll find that from the different pillars of Hajj is that you take the small pebbles and you throw it at what they call the Jamrat al-Aqaba on the day of the Eid. Or a person might cut their hair. So, a person, matter of fact, let me go through the stages of Hajj a little bit. On the day of Hajj, when Hajj starts, you'll find that the people, when Hajj starts, go to place of Arafah. They go to Arafah. They stay there the whole day of Arafah. That's when Hajj starts. The people are in Mina. They start in Mina. And on the day when Hajj officially starts, everyone goes to Arafah. Arafah is not just a mountain. Arafah is a whole area. You understand, everyone? There's no way that millions of people can stand on a mountain. So when people go to Arafah, it's a whole area in Mecca. And that's what everyone is about to perform in a couple of weeks, because we know Dhul Hijjah is right around the corner, everyone. So Dhul Hijjah is about when Dhul Qi'dah, next month, as we know, is what? Dhul Hijjah. On the day of Hajj, everyone goes to Arafah. They stay there and they devote it in worship, staying there the whole day until the sun sets. Then the people, of course, they pray, and then they embark upon what? Going to Muzdalifah. Going to Muzdalifah. Muzdalifah, people spend the night in Muzdalifah. You'll find that they spend the night in Muzdalifah. It's the following day after what? The day of Arafah. When they're in the Muzdalifah, they sleep, and then in the morning time, they're walking now back towards Mina, or they're walking to perform what they call Tawaf al-Ifada. Tawaf al-Ifada. Tawaf al-Ifada, meaning some of them will go back to the Haram where where the Kaaba is, and of course performing what they call Tawaf al-Ifada, performing 7 circuits around the Kaaba, and performing Sa'i at what, everyone? Also the Mas'a, which is where we know where Safa and Marwa is located. Something you would do normally if you were performing Umrah, same exact thing. After you perform Tawaf al-Ifada, the people now are going to return back to what? They're going to return back to Mina, so they can now cut their hair, or slaughter their sacrifice, or start the throw, the Jamrat al-Aqaba. To throw the pebbles at the Jamrat al-Aqaba. And it's not a shaitan that's there. Certain people think that. But that is the place where initially how that particular sunnah started. But anyway, once you perform Tawaf al-Ifada, Now you have the option. The message of Allah, I'm going to mention the hadith. They can either cut their hair first, or they can slaughter first, or they can what? Throw the jamrah al-aqaba. Once you do those things, everyone, or if you cut your hair, the first type of, you become halal in the first instance, but it's not the final one yet. So everything that was haram before, some of it has now become lawful for you. So that's called the first tahallul al-awwal. And I'm going to mention that, don't worry. So, now when I bring the explanation, everyone will understand. So I gave a little bit, just a summarized version, even though there's more detail than that. So a person now is performing Hajj. He goes to Arafah. So now he went, of course, to Muzdalifah. Then, of course, now he Rama. كان حاجا فرما جمرة العقبة. So that's now he performed Tawaf al-Ifada. Finish. Jamrat al-Aqaba, he threw the stones at the Jamra al-Aqaba. And he also cut his hair. Or what have you. So the first instance, what they call the first stage of you becoming fully halal out of ihram has now actualized. You understand? This first instance, is it permissible now to get married? That's what the people want to ask. ظاهر الحديث أنه لا يجوز. The apparent meaning of the hadith, even if it was the what? The first stage, one shouldn't do it. Just so you now do not put yourself in a state of ikhtilaf, of difference of opinion. Some might say, of course, no, maybe, or what have you. But the best thing in order to preserve your religion is to remove yourself from ikhtilaf amongst the scholars. Remove yourself from differences from amongst the scholars. So the best thing is to just what? Put it off to after you completely finish. So you now then expose yourself to differences amongst what Ahl Ilm say. So that's the first thing. So we'll say to the person, طيب, the first halal, the first instance where I become halal has actualized. I passed that stage. So now maybe I can do the marriage contract. And like we said, we say to that individual, wait, don't fall into what they call khilaf, differences amongst the scholars where you subject your religion to affairs where they might differ in, especially these type of matters. So due to the fact, just to say, to play the safe, or play it safe, like I said, we will say to the individual, embark upon that matter once the second stage where you become halal has been what? Actualized, where everything now for you has become lawful. When your hajj rights are completed, then at the same time now you can what? Indulge in those matters. So that's the thing that we wanted to mention in basically, just to sum up. The last thing, before I get to the other instance with the hadith of Maymuna and Abdullah bin Abbas, which is also in your books. Now, let's just say, أن أحدا قد عقل فهذا الذي ينبغي أن يقال فيه. You'll find that they say, well, the affair while we discuss this, what if it was somebody Muslim and they didn't know? So you find that Ahl Ilm do mention that. Let's just say they didn't study this class. So they don't know. So they married after the first instance where they became halal. Not the second, the first. So that's the reason why the ulama mentioned it. So a person might come for hajj and he didn't know. And he said, well, I'm married. I indulged in a marriage contract with a family, but we didn't consummate. Is my marriage halal or not? Is my marriage valid or not? That's what we will have to discuss. Because this could happen. So a person would come to Hajj, never studied these chapters, never studied this information. And he said, well, I didn't know. Is my marriage valid or did I fall into something? We say, in that instance, that's what Ahl Ilm mentioned about these details. So your father, even Shaykh Uthaymeen mentioned this. So you understand the question, everyone? Basically, I'm speaking about someone who's ignorant. He doesn't know. I came for Hajj. I'm married. I had partaken in a what? Marital contract. But we didn't what? Consummate. Now, if he consummated, that could ruin his what? It could ruin his Hajj. Because he didn't do the second stage of where he became fully what? Halal. He didn't do it yet. The second stage. Like we said, in Hajj, there's the first stage where you leave it out of ihram. Then you have the second stage where everything now becomes halal. In the first stage, That's the affair that we want to discuss. What Ahl Ilm say. So a person that's ignorant, coming for Hajj or Umrah, fell into this. But he didn't consummate. Is it clear, everyone? He didn't. He didn't consummate. But he did get married. So what do we say? He said, والذي ينبغي للمفتي في هذه المسألة أنه إذا كان ابتداء العقد فلا يعقد. He said, what is befitting for the one who gives an Islamic ruling in this matter, that if it's the beginning of the contract where it wasn't made at all, tell them, don't do it. Is it clear? لا يعقد. Don't make the contract. Is it clear? لكن لو فرض أن أحدا قد عقد. Now let's just say, supposedly, someone didn't know this hukum, this ruling. So now he made the contract. So what do we say? I didn't know. I was ignorant. I made a marital contract, or what have you, with a brother he's not making Hajj, but he's there. But I'm in the state of Ihram. But I did finish my rituals where the first instance of me becoming halal has taken place. So what do? Do I remarry the sister after marriage is over, after Hajj is over, or do I what? Or do I continue? Based upon the fact that I believe that the marriage contract is still what? Valid. He said, the first thing, like we said, if the marital contract was not made, we tell them immediately, don't do it. Just wait. However, the person down that's ignorant coming and saying, well, I didn't know. So what do? He said, وهو الذي ينبغي أن يقال فيه بالقول الثاني لصعوبة تجديد العقد ولأنه ربما يكون هناك ذرية جاءوا من بعده. مثال هذا لو أن شخصا حج ورمى وطاف وسعى ولكن لم يحلق ثم عقد النكاح قبل أن يحلق وقبل أن يفدي عن الحلق فماذا نقول? Now listen to this. He said, if he already now indulged in that, after, like we said, the first time he became, or the first instance he became halal, not before, after the first stage where he became halal. He said, what we would say is, it is befitting al-qawl al-thani, the second, due to the fact that it would be may be hard to renew the aqd. He said maybe that perhaps it would be dhurriya, or there will be some type of lineage that will come after him, or what have you. Meaning, a person came, he performed hajj. He threw the Jamrat al-Aqaba, he made tawaf al-ifada, he also performed sa'i. However, he didn't cut his hair yet. But we know that he did perform the first instance where he became halal. Then he made a marital contract before he cut his hair and before he had sacrificed, or what have you. Or rather, I'm sorry, everyone. Before he cut his hair, or he ransomed due to the fact that he had a sickness on his head. What do we say? So keep in mind, he threw the Jamrah, he performed Tawaf al-Ifada. So the first instance where he became halal has what? Actualized, it's done. We would say in this instance, your aqid, your contract is still valid. Is it clear? The contract is still valid. Due to the fact that we know that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu has said the authentic narration, he said, إِذَا رَمَيْتُمْ وَحَلَقْتُمْ حَلَّ لَكُمْ كُلُّ شَيْءٍ إِلَّا النِّسَاءِ. He said, if you threw at the Jamrah and cut your hair, everything has become halal for you except intimacy of women. Except intimacy of women. Based upon that, just to sum it up, everyone, for that person that's ignorant, after he became in the the first stage that he already finished, we say your marriage contract is still what? Valid, but wait until the second stage so you can be what? Intimate. Don't do it while you're in the first. You have to do it in the second where all the rituals are completed. Then in that instance, you can be what? Intimate with your wife. However, like we said, the Shaykh mentions it says, if the person did not do it at all yet, tell him immediately, don't do it. Wait till Hajj is over, perform all your rituals, fulfill all the pillars, and then in that instance, get married. Remove yourself from the affairs of ikhtilaf amongst the scholars or differences amongst the ulama so you can preserve your religion and preserve your what? Your rituals and your rites of Hajj, performing it completely. But like we said, there are instances where people will come and they not know. So what do we say to them? So that's the reason why the ulama mentions these details in order to give them the proper ruling of Islam. So that instance, like we said, if they did this, then that instance, like we said, your marriage contract is still valid, but wait till the second stage where you become fully halal, meaning that you're out of ihram, and then consummate your marriage. So that's the thing. So from the fawaid of the hadith, it's not befitting for the man, number one, that he busies himself with affairs that preoccupies him from worship. You'll find the Ahl al-Ilm that they say this. They say, أنه لا ينبغي للإنسان يأتي بما يشغله عن العبادة أو بما يكون ذريعة لإفسادها. من أين يؤخذ من نهي المحرم عن النكاح؟ لأنه إما أن يشتغل وإما يدخل فيفسد نسكه. He said, from the meaning of this hadith here, he said that it is not befitting that man that he indulges in something that preoccupies him from worship, or what could be a means for him to invalidate it. A dhari'ah. A dhari'ah is a method or means to indulge in an affair to what? Cause you to fall into it, and as a result you invalidate it. Where do we take or extrapolate this particular wording? From the hadith itself, where the Messenger of Allah prohibited what, everyone? Prohibited the muhrim, the one who's in the state of ihram, from marrying. Because either he'll become preoccupied mentally, or he will indulge in an affair, will consummate, and he will invalidate his rituals. Is it clear? Good. Also, in this narration, the forbidden to khitbat al-muhrim khatiban kan or makhtuban. The impermissibility or the forbiddance of a marital engagement. So we know nikah is the marriage itself, right, everyone? Khitbah is a marital engagement. So that's the affair that takes place before the Before the marriage. It's called a marital engagement. We're engaged. You married? No. But however, I'm in what? I'm engaged. Is it clear, everyone? Is that unbelievable? You guys understand or not understand? No. You sure? Yeah. I don't. You don't understand? I'm engaged. That doesn't mean you're married. I'm engaged to be married. I hate that word, intended. Is it clear, everyone? That's the thing here in Philadelphia. My intended. Intended means that it's not permissible for you to what? It's not permissible for you to be intimate with her. Certain people get that mixed up. You just engaged, meaning that we've planned. We sat down. We see there's some general compatibility, and that we're embarked upon inshallah, finalizing our marriage. But we're not to put it in better perspective here. That's my intended. What they actually want to say is we're engaged. You understand? Yeah. Here in Philadelphia, it says my intended. It's not your intended. You are what? You're engaged. We are engaged to get what? Married. Understand? We're engaged. Meaning we had to sit down. We seen there's some general compatibility, and we both gave each other our word. Is it clear? Once you say, okay, now I'm going to marry you. Are you interested in? Are we now interested in getting married? We both say what in the sitting? What? Yes. In that instance, you are now what? Engaged. But you're not what? Married. So nothing is halal until you make the actual marriage contract. Is it clear? Yes. Here in Philadelphia, in certain areas and cities, I've heard some weird things. Well, we're engaged, so that means I can indulge in certain affairs. No, you can't. That does not mean that at all. She is not halal for you, and you are not halal for her. Is it clear? Yes. Good. Fine. So in this narration, the impermissibility of khitbah, the actual marital the actual khitbah, that it means the marital engagement. The engagement. Whether it be from the person, the man, or the female. Doesn't matter. The Prophet ﷺ made it clear, he said, وَلَا يَخْطُبْ, meaning he does not embark upon a marital engagement at all. He doesn't do it. Doesn't seek it. لَا يَخْطُبْ وَلَا يُخْطَبَ عَلَيْهِ. Nor should one approach them about They sought from them that affair. Do you want to get married? Possibly. Do you want to? To the end of it. Because usually once now it's presented, it will preoccupy your what? It'll preoccupy your mind. It'll make your mind possibly what? Thinking about other affairs and thinking about that affair specifically. So from the fawaid of the hadith, you'll find that from the wisdoms of the religion to let you know how complete Islam is that it shows not only of affairs of falling into it itself, but however shutting the doors that can what? Lead to it. So that's from the wisdoms to show how Islam is perfect. And you'll find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that in his book of so many ayat. For example, تِلْكَ حُدُودُ اللَّهِ فَلَا تَقْرَبُوهَا. That is the boundaries of Allah. Don't go near them. Allah didn't say don't fall into them. He said what? Do not approach them, nor go near it. To put in one's mind that the means for you to fall into it, also what? Protect yourself from it. So anything that will lead to it, stay away from it also. And also from this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ also made that clear. In the wording here, to say, even affairs pertaining to what? Marital engagements. Why? Because it will lead you to what? Another matter. So that's from the wisdoms of Islam that includes the doors off to affairs that are what? Forbidden. So if you look to the affairs pertaining to Tawheed and Aqidah, same thing. Anything that will lead to what? Polytheism, Allah shut the doors to it. From lanterns and lights around graves, from pictures and images, even though that affair has become widely spread, with al-asaf, and all those other different affairs that will lead one to idol worship or one's heart being connected with Allah in worship. So the Prophet ﷺ, notice, any affair that will lead to it, the door has been what? Shut. Even in affairs of, like we said, that are forbidden. And especially in affairs pertaining to the pillars of our religion. And from those pillars is what, everyone? Hajj and Umrah. It's a pillar. Taking that in consideration, you'll find in this particular narration, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of his infinite wisdom, revealed to the message of Allah that not to indulge in these matters, so it won't lead to something what that could potentially invalidate this great affair or this great aspect of worship and the pillars or its rights. Fine. A person might say what they call ta'rif. I think I can leave that. Let's keep going. Hadith Abdullah ibn Abbas. Let's read this narration of Abdullah ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma. قال تزوج النبي صلوات الله عليه وسلامه ميمونة وهو محرم والحديث متفق عليه. The hadith of Abdullah ibn Abbas, that the Messenger of Allah married Maymuna from our mothers, being the wives of the Messenger of Allah, and he was in a state of ihram. Now read the next narration. For Muslim upon Maymuna radiyallahu anha, she said that the Messenger of Allah married her. She said this about herself. I married the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he was out of the state of ihram. He was out of the state where he finalized his rituals until he was not considered muhrim. He was not in the state of ihram anymore. Is it clear, everyone? Good. A person might ask, so what's the contradiction here? Or is there a contradiction here? That's what one needs to ask themselves. So, you have two matters. Maymuna, number one, everyone, was the maternal aunt of Abdullah ibn Abbas. That was his maternal aunt. Maternal, let me write this down. The maternal aunt of Abdullah ibn Abbas. Khala Abdullah ibn Abbas. Khalatuhu, the maternal aunt. وَقَوْلُهُ وَهُوَ مُحْرِمٌ. So the message, they say that Abdullah ibn Abbas said that he was in a state of ihram. So he married her and he was a muhrim for Umrah. Then you have the narration of Maymuna, where she said herself that the Messenger of Allah made the marriage contract and he married her while he was halal. What does that mean? He was halal means what? He wasn't in ihram anymore. He was not in ihram anymore. You have another narration upon Abu Rafi'. So keep this in mind. Abu Rafi' radiyallahu anhu. Abu Rafi' brings a narration that he was the one that carried out and facilitated it between Maymuna and the Messenger of Allah. Meaning he was the one that was involved to facilitate it. So now we have a narration of Abdullah bin Abbas, we have a narration of Maymuna, and we have a narration of Abu Rafi' radiyallahu anhu, أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم تزوج ميمونة وهو حلال قال وكنت السفير بينهما يعني الواسطة. So you have Abu Rafi', he said that the Messenger of Allah married Maymuna and he was not in ihram anymore. He said, I was the safir between them, meaning I was the middleman that aided in what? Facilitating it. I was the middleman in facilitating it. So a person might say, it seems there's a contradiction between the narration of Abdullah bin Abbas that's been agreed upon and the hadith of Maymuna, الذي رواه Muslim, which is in and reported by the great Imam Muslim in the Sahih. وحديث أبي رافع اختلف العلماء رحمه الله في الترجيح بينهما فمن العلماء من يرجح. Let's keep this straight to the point. You'll find that Ahl Ilm, that they say that there's no contradiction. They say the narration that is in Tirmidhi, in his Jami' an Abi Rafi', we just mentioned that narration. So Abu Rafi' said that I was the one that facilitated the matter. There's another narration that says, وَكُنْتُ أَنَا الرَّسُولُ فِي مَا بَيْنَهُمَا. There's another narration where Abu Rafi' said about him that I was the messenger, meaning that I was going between them, facilitating it, going back, bringing the news, or what have you. Is it clear? إذن تكون رواية ابن عباس وهما وإن كان سندها صحيح. Even though the narration of Abdullah ibn Abbas is authentic, however, due to the fact that Maymuna is the one that said about herself, and Abu Rafi', which is the middleman, and Abdullah ibn Abbas here, just what? He fell into a little mistake. The Abdullah ibn Abbas, in this particular instance, that he felt what they call wahm. Wahm means he thought the affair was like that, but there's the matter that came that showed that it was not, even though he thought this particular matter. And at that time, they said that Abdullah ibn Abbas, he was very young. He was saghir. So in that instance, he was not totally accurate in the story, due to the fact that he was in that instance, he was very what? He was very young. So, لم يضبط القصة تماما. He didn't accurately what? Totally understood, or if you want to say totally accurate or astute in that particular instance where he narrated or understood the story accurately. So in that instance, Maymuna came, which is his actual wife, and said it herself, that I married the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he was not in ihram anymore. And then Abu Rafi' said the same thing. I was the one that was what? I was the one organizing and facilitating, and I was the middleman. And the Messenger of Allah clearly was what? Was halal. So I said in that particular instance that Abdullah bin Abbas radiyallahu anhu, he was young, and in that particular instance, in that particular story, he was not accurate, due to the fact that those other narrations where the person who's the actual person who's indulged in the affair said it clearly that I witnessed, and the person that also facilitated said eyewitness. So in that instance, a few little small little minor mistakes as far as in regards to what that particular matter does not harm the accuracy of Abdullah ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma, because everyone at the end of the day is still what? Human. And those small little slip-ups does not affect how the great authentic narrations that he has and he was accurate in. And just to have a little small slip-ups here and there does not affect their reliability, nor their what? Their precision in their affairs. Is it clear, everyone? Good.
What was his name again? The brother, the married woman.
Abu Rafi'. Abu Rafi'. Rafi'. Ra, alif, fa, ayn. Rafi'. Abu Rafi'. Radiyallahu anhu. Is it clear, everyone? Before we move on. طيب. So, Abdullah bin Abbas, so hence in that instance, if there's a ta'arud between the two narrations, and they both are equal in their strength, meaning as far as the isnad, then of course we know from our religion and how accurate it is and the stages and the steps that are given, you'll find that they have those steps. For example, فَإِنَّهُ يُرَجَّحْ رِوَايَةِ الْأَكْثَرِ. You'll find that the narration of the group of those who are accurate takes precedence over the narration of one individual. In that particular instance, in regards to these narrations. لأن الوهم من الفرد أقرب من وهم الجماعة. Due to the fact that one making that little slip up from an individual is more close, of course, than those who are a group of people who are accurate and are all what? Reliable. وَالْجَمَاعَةُ كُلُّهُمْ أَخْبَرُوا. And you'll find that the group here is an instance, or this example here is what we're saying, where the group informed that the Messenger of Allah married Maymuna, and she was what? Halal. For Abdullah ibn Abbas, of course, أخبرنه تزوجها وهو محرم ولابد أن إحدى الروايتين وهم والوهم في رواية ابن عباس أولى لأنه فرد ورواية غيره ورواية جماعة فيبعد الوهم عنها. To the end of what the great Imam Shams al-Din, the Imam al-Dhahabi, rahimahullah, that he mentioned, said about this narration. He said, in this particular instance, you'll find that those who are involved in the actual what? Story said that that was not true. We seen and we witnessed and we were involved. So the person that's involved in the situation are what? They are more in tune to what? Know about their situation more than anyone else. Is it clear? People are actually what? Involved in the situation. So that's what you'll find that Ahl Ilm that they say in that particular instance, where the wife herself said it and the person who facilitated also said it. That I witnessed and I was involved and I was the one that he seen it with my own eyes. But the Messenger of Allah ﷺ was not in that state where he married Maymuna. Is it clear? Good. Just keep going. It's time?
No, I'm going to make it good.
Oh, تفضل. I think we got a couple more minutes. I'm sorry, everyone. So let's keep going. Let's read. وعن عقبة بن عامر, next hadith. عن عقبة بن عامر رضي الله عنه قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن أحق الشروط أن يوفى به ما استحللتم به الفروج. And the narration has been Bukhari Muslim with the exact wording, which is from the highest levels of authenticity of the narration. It says that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ mentioned the authentic narration that the most deserving of conditions that should be fulfilled is what made the private parts lawful. Is what made the private parts lawful. So that's the next narrations in regards to marriage. So we just finalized all the different, or some of the affairs of what those particular marriages that are impermissible. The affairs pertaining to what's invalid or valid marriage and what's a invalid marriage. Type. Now we continue to say the next type of what makes the marriages valid. So keep in mind, we've been covering narrations that's pertaining to what that could possibly validate the marriage and what also would invalidate. But for the most part, we've been covering the different instances and examples of the marriages that were what? That are invalid. That are invalid. So the next type a person might say, the Messenger of Allah ﷺ said the most deserving of conditions to be fulfilled is what made the private parts lawful. إِنَّ أَحَقَ الشُّرُوطِ أَن يُوَفَّى بَهِ مَا اسْتَحْلَلْتُمْ بِهِ الْفُرُوجِ. The most deserving of conditions to be fulfilled is what made the private parts lawful. So now in that instance, everyone, we're going to now cover affairs pertaining to the different types of what validates the marriage. And we already covered those, the pillars of what validates it. And there's an instance what's called shurut fin nikah, conditions in the marriage. So you have the first category, which we'll cover inshallah, which is called shurut nikah. Then you have what they call shurut fi nikah. You have what they call the conditions of what validates the marriage and the conditions in the marriage. In the marriage. And that's what we'll discuss in a minute. So based upon that, that brings us to the other matters. So the word shart in the Arabic language we know is shart is an alama, but we know that shart in the Kitab al-Sunnah, which means or translates as condition, is ilzam ahad al-muta'aqidain lil-akhar bimujib al-aqd bi-shay'in lahu fihi maslaha. Basically now we're speaking about conditions in the marriage contract. That's the topic. We already covered a couple of chapters ago, everyone, conditions of the marriage contract, which validates it, such as we know, a wali. Also, there has to be what? There have to be male Muslim 5-day praying witnesses. 5 times a day praying Muslims. And they have to be men. Right, everyone? And, of course, also has to be a wali. Or at the least a wakil that has been what? Designated by the ruler. Or by the qadi. Or in these countries, it would be the imam of the masjid. What have you. طيب. And it has to be also, like we mentioned, it said, affairs pertaining to also announcing the nikah. Announcing the marriage contract. Announcing it and making it what? Known. From all those affairs that makes the marriage, like we said, valid. That's the conditions of the marriage contract. That's conditions of the marriage contract. Even like we talked about before, also the mahar. Setting the actual dowry and all those different matters that we already covered. We don't need to mention that again. However, this topic of today, everyone, is pertaining to what? Conditions in the marriage contract. In the marriage contract. That's a difference. And that's the affair that we'll discuss in a minute. And we'll start and inaugurate the explanations by saying this. So keep in mind that the topic is not revolving around what we already discussed months ago. By saying you have to have a wali. You have to seek permission from the wali. Also the woman also has to be what? Consulted. And in addition to the witnesses. And it has to be a what? Dowry or what have you. And in addition to the affairs pertaining to announcing the marriage and all those other details we mentioned before. That's not what we're discussing here. Those are conditions of the marriage contract. This is called conditions in the marriage contract. So that's what the topic revolves around. So now, a person will come to the marriage contract and they will now bind within it, in accordance to that contract, of something that is in it will be a benefit. You understand, everyone? Don't worry, I'm going to mention the examples. So that's considered the condition in the contracts. ومنها النكاح فإذا شرط المرأة عند العقد على زوجها شروطا لها فيها مصلحة. For example, the man, or well, let's start with the woman. شرطت المرأة عند العقد على زوجها شروطا لها فيها مصلحة فإنه يجب الوفاء بها. To the end of it. If a woman now makes a condition, and she can, in the contract, upon the husband, conditions that will be in it, for example, a benefit. I'm going to give an example now. If he agrees to it, he has to what? He has to fulfill it. Or if he makes the condition, vice versa. He comes with a condition, and that condition does not oppose the Kitab al-Sunnah. So that's the first thing, to make the condition valid. It cannot be from those shurut that oppose the Kitab al-Sunnah. Is it clear, everyone? It has to be something that's legitimate, something that the Islamic legislation allows, and like we said, it doesn't infringe upon anything that opposes the religion. So a person might say, okay, Abdul Razak, give us the examples. For example, a woman might say, if we marry, I don't want to move in with you until, let's just say, after 8 months. You understand? Let's just say, for example, my mother has cancer. So I'm going to be by her side, taking care of her in the instance that we get married. I want to stay with my wife. Or, for example, my mother is sick. 3 days out the week, I want to be with her at the nights to take care of her because she's sick. You understand, everyone? So in that is a benefit for the what? For the person who made the condition. Is it clear? Similar to that, same thing. The husband was saying that if we marry, let's just say, for example, that if we can now not consummate until, let's just say, after a month. Let's not consummate the marriage until after a month into the marriage. I don't want to consummate till a month, let's say. She agrees to it, then what? She has to fulfill it. Or let's just say, if I marry you, if my mother comes, my mother's sickly also, I have to take care of her at night, but what I can do at the night is 3 days. But in the nights, my mother needs my help for such and such affair, or to take care of her, or whatever, or what have you. Or let's just say, a woman will mention, well, if we get married, I don't just want to move in. I want it to be done gradually, because I've never been out my mother and parents' house before. And I'm used to that. I'm not used to just moving in with somebody immediately. But can we gradually do it, where maybe the first month we can start with 2 days, then the next month 3, and try to make it a gradual process until I feel comfortable moving in. Is it clear, everyone? Due to the fact it might be a shock upon a female to just immediately move out of her parents' house to someone else's house, and they feel a little bit feel a little shock or a little bit uncomfortable. So let's just say those type of different conditions that a person makes. Is it clear, everyone? So I'm going to get, in order to sum it up in a minute. Is it time yet? No, it's not time. I think it comes at 8:20, if I'm not mistaken, everyone. Here in Philadelphia, I think it's 8:20. Yeah, right. But so in that instance, as we said, so either which way, those type of conditions. Now let's just say if they're infringed upon, where someone says, and they start to play little games. And this is the problem that takes place in a lot of instances that I've experienced. A person will agree to it, and then they what? Then they come and they'll renege, but they won't say it, but in their actions they're what? Reneging. In their actions. Now you start to see little games. They're not fulfilling what they what? Agreed, either from the brother's side or the sister's side. So a person has to be honest. Number one, be truthful. Don't agree to something that you say you can say I can handle, and then in the instance where you're now in the situation, you start to play games and say, you know what? You start to now come with little acts and statements that necessitate that you're going against what you what? Agreed with. Is it clear, everyone? Fine. Now, in that instance, now the person goes against it. A person might say, well, now I'm married to you. I didn't know that this affair... It's not time yet. It's not time yet. No, it isn't.
Coming 8:19.
No, it's not 8. Today, yes. No, it's not in yet. It's not in yet. About 1 more minute, 2 more minutes. Fine. So in that instance, today, yes, just wait just a second to show. Fine. So in that instance, everyone, what was I saying? I lost my train of thought.
The games that you're saying that the individuals start to show difference.
Good. So a person now comes and they start to play games. So now they're starting to come with little, well, I didn't know, I really didn't feel like this was going to be a burden, but I see it to be a burden now. I want you to be here every day. And even though your mother's sick, I understand, but I want my wife to be here every day. Or you'll find that certain games that people play, they'll start picking on you. And you'll find in their actions that they're really not pleased with them being with their mother. So you'll find that the wife might come upon her husband and he's got an attitude. So he's saying, man, you haven't been here for 3 days. But the sister will say, for example, well, this is what you agreed to. My mother's sick. She